let's start here, if I may, and to give a bio for those that don't know Rabbi Sherman. Rabbi Sherman oversees the Sinai Temple Israel Center, which engages the synagogue and Los Angeles community Israel advocacy and education through speakers, class trips, and programs. Founded the Sinai Temple Israel Center Rabbinical School Fellowship, which trains future rabbis through seminaries across North America, how to engage Israel in a deep and nuanced manner, and directs the David and Angella Nazarian Youth Fellowship, inspiring the next generation of Jewish leaders to use their voices in Israel and civic conversations. The bio goes on. I won't read the rest of it, but I would say he has been featured on Inside the NBA with Ernie Johnson and Charles Barkley, and served as an in-studio guest on ESPN's NBA Today to discuss and educate viewers following social media posts containing anti-Semitic content. How did you get that gig, sir?
How did I get that gig? So it's actually a beautiful story that I think deals with anti-Semitism. In 2021, I started a podcast, Rabbi on the Sidelines, when there was no synagogue programming going on. I'm passionate about sports and have some nice relationships in sports. And I decided to interview people within the sports world who would tell me about their heart and soul, not about the box score and the trade deadline. And actually reached out to Ernie Johnson on Twitter after he said something very powerful on the NCAA tournament during that year of COVID. And he wrote back to me, and I said, would you come on my podcast? It's new. And he said, no problem. He had suffered a loss of his son, Michael of blessed memory. I had suffered the loss of my brother, Eyal of blessed memory. It's semi-similar stories. And so we did this podcast after a year and a half of going back and forth. And I tell that story because when Kyrie Irving made his remarks on Twitter, which sort of shook the world along with Kanye West, I got a text message from Ernie Johnson, who does a podcast with Charles Barkley called The Steam Room. And he said, Charles Barkley said, we need to talk to a rabbi about this. And Ernie, who's a very religious Christian, said, well, we're going to talk to my rabbi. And from ESPN, or from Inside the NBA, which aired that night, the last night that Kyrie Irving played, on the desk, they said, we're going to go to the rabbi in Los Angeles and see what they had to say. And then the next day, Jonathan Greenblatt and the ADL handed down 6 consequences for Kyrie Irving. And NBA Today down the street, also in LA, they called and they said, you're down the street, can you please come on down, read the ADL statement and give sort of a rabbinic approach to that. And so it's actually pretty historic that in 48 hours, there was a rabbi on the 2 major sports channels speaking about sports and faith, but really speaking out against anti-Semitism, but also allyship. And the last thing I'll say, because it does go to what we're doing for our Berens Scholars program, is off the air was the most important piece. When we were having relationships with these people, I was sitting next to Vince Carter, one of the great NBA players, and he said, hey, my mom, she's actually very active in her church in Daytona. And I was talking to another WNBA player, Shanae Oglemike, and she said, Rabbi, I'm Catholic, but I love going to my friend's Shabbat dinners. And when they just begin speaking person to person about their spiritual lives, that's when it really became alive. So it's well beyond the sports, but it started with the ball.
Excellent. Well, it is very much related to what we're doing, is
Yes.
understanding and educating all that. I'll have some questions on that. So that is great that you're on there, and good luck. Are you Lakers or Clippers by any chance?
We do a bit of both, actually. We are bipartisan. Don't want to lose our 501c3 status in the sports world either.
That would be true, because as the rabbi in the Los Angeles shul, you don't want to take sides on that.
We have Trojans and Bruins, we have Lakers and Clippers, but we only have one people and one Israel. How about that?
Excellent, excellent. Rabbi, to share with us, everyone, about the Berens Scholar Program, can you tell us what it is? How did it begin? What was your reason for implementing it?
Yes, and I have a special guest with us, Tori Green, a Hebrew Union College student who's our director and coordinator of that program. So I'll start, and then Tori will fill in the blank because she's working the magic with these teens. So I'll actually back up to 2021 because we started a rabbinical fellowship for rabbinical students across 11 seminaries, including JTS and AJU, the conservative movement, but includes Yeshiva University, includes Hebrew Union College, includes Boston Hebrew College in Boston, includes Academy of Jewish Religion. And we started that after we realized that there was future rabbis that might have need some more nuanced training in Israel, not education, but in Israel conversation. And so we started that in 2021. It was an amazing group of 16 rabbinical students. We then had 22 last year. We're in the process of our acceptances in this moment. Tori was one of our first students. And we looked at everything on the ground, the Arab narrative, the Christian narrative, the Jewish narrative, North and South. During that first year was a lot about judicial reform, how people can speak to each other. And then the second year, of course, was post October 7th. And it was really an intense year about how to be a rabbi in the diaspora and dealing with Israel. I say that because that fellowship was a very important model of how to speak to each other across different lines, across different allyships. When the Berens family, Julie Platt, who's a member of our community, the president of the Jewish Federation of North America right now, very active in the college scene, specifically University of Pennsylvania. When her father, Robert M. Berens, passed away, blessed memory, at 97 years old, she came to myself and Rabbi Guzik, my wife and my co-senior rabbi at Sinai Temple, and she said, anti-Semitism, I want to, in honor of my father, do something about that. And all she said was anti-Semitism. And then she said this, which is really important. I want every child to go to any college campus that they want and feel comfortable knowing how to lead any college campuses that they want, not that we feel comfortable at. And so I called Tori, who was, still is a Hebrew Union College student. I said, we've worked together. You've trained under our hashkafa, under our approach of how we do these topics. Tori's a genius at collaborative conversation. Let's work together and do this. And so I'll tell Tori, will open up in 1 second about what she's doing on the ground. But when we talk about curriculum, so it was for seniors in high school, a couple 11th graders we have. I haven't seen a lot of these kids since their bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. And it was an obvious need. It was not hard to recruit for these students. They were asking questions like, how Jewish should I be on my college application? Questions that we were never asking 2 years ago. Rabbi Wolpe had just had his year at Harvard, coming off the anti-Semitism committee, but staying at the Harvard Divinity School. He was our first speaker. We've had Jonathan Greenblatt just this past week, who I know the Men's Club had, or United Synagogue had just on Sunday as well. Actually, right after our call, he was with United Synagogue. And we have seen extreme engagement from our students and from our parents. This is something that they are specifically looking for. So I'll have maybe Tori share a few words about what she's doing on the ground and maybe what she's seeing in these students and how she's seen the growth over this pilot year of the last few months.
Yeah,
Welcome,
thanks,
Tori.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So one of the things that I thought was an important piece of this whole situation, especially with Julie Platt's vision, was teaching these teens how to engage in dialogue, because it's almost useless for us to send them off to college campuses where we know they're going to have a hard time and there's going to be difficult conversation if they don't learn the art of engaging in difficult conversation. And I really think it is an art, and something that I have been doing for a very, very long time. When I did the rabbinic fellowship at Sinai Temple, we were asked to set an intention, and I said my intention was chutzpah. So that's been how Rabbi Sherman has known me essentially the entire time that he's known me. And I imagined this fellowship as a laboratory for these teens to be able to engage in that difficult conversation, because over the year prior, they've had to be on defense. And so what would it look like for them to no longer be to instead of being on defense, be thinking critically about how do we engage in these conversations? How do we respond? What are the things that we're supposed to be looking out for? And so every session has been in 2 parts. We have a speaker, and usually that speaker is someone, a leader in the community. So we have
national prominence.
Yes, a leader in the community of national prominence. Thank you. We had Jonah Platt, who has his podcast, being Jewish. We just had Jonathan Greenblatt. We spoke to Rabbi Wolpe, and we have some really exciting people in the future. Also, these teens have had opportunities to go to VIP events and VIP experiences and meet with just people that many people are trying to meet with and have more intimate experiences with them. Ofer Engel, who's one of the released hostages, is one of those experiences that they've had, and they had it at a small gathering at a home. And so that's the first half, and then the second half is immersive practice of these values. So the first session that we did was on on bias, like showing up with bias to a conversation. Because a lot of them had asked, how do we show up without bias? And I don't think there's any way to show up without bias, but it's about naming our bias, right? So in research and in science, they say what makes a researcher and a scientist trustworthy is not that they don't have bias, but that they acknowledge their bias. And so teaching them how to use their bias instead of as a weakness, your bias as your power, right? So saying something like, I've actually been there and I've been learning about this land my entire life. That is the history and length of information that I have about this place compared to the maybe 1 semester that some people have been learning about this. Then we talked about headlines and news headlines and how to read different headlines, which just media literacy is something that a lot of people are not being taught anymore. And so that's an important thing. Practicing actual arguing, and then also thinking of different ways to respond with Jewish values, and really like pushing the importance of curiosity as being sort of at the forefront of any conversation. Not necessarily going into a conversation to win. Rabbi Wolpe brilliantly said at the first session, don't necessarily go to the conversation to win. Go to the conversation to actually get to know the person and earnestly listen to what they're saying, not think about how you're going to respond. So we've been practicing that, and then moving into next semester, we'll have more immersive experiences at places, meeting community members, sort of going out into the community.
When Rabbi Wolpe talks about not doing the win, one of the parents actually said, but can you give us little victories? And we really took that to heart. Little victories is meeting a released hostage and knowing that story. And what we like to do, and we do this with the rabbinical students too, is we're one model that we hope will replicate like a cell to their schools. And we're watching that. So they're coming and they're saying, oh my gosh, I love this person. Do you think they would come to the Jewish Family Alliance at Harvard Westlake? I said, absolutely. And so the fact that they are getting the tools to then make their own tools in their own communities. And then when I get on the college campus, we actually, at Hillel's and Chabad's, and I say both of them because they are both active on college campuses, they have to look for the students, right? They're not just there. And so we want, after April, when we know where these kids are going next year, we want to call those campuses and say, you have an all-star coming, you're ready to go. And then when we expand nationally, which we'll talk about later, we want people from New York and LA to say, oh, you're at Penn or you're at Vanderbilt or you're at Tulane, you went through the Berens College program. We don't have to be trained, we're actually ready. And the big piece is by desire, not by need. We can't have students walking on the college campus because we need them to be leaders. We want them to desire to be that leader.
So Rabbi, if I may ask, the fact that this program was needed, I'm assuming that all the 22 students in the current program either went through Hebrew school and bar mitzvahs and confirmation, or perhaps are going to day schools. Is your research showing that when they finish their Jewish education, either at the day school or your synagogue religious school, that they're not prepared for these discussions when they go to college?
So if I was going to college today, I wouldn't be prepared. And I've been in this field for 15 years. To walk onto a college campus with the vitriol that's happening, and as Rabbi Wolpe told us that day, right? He said, people were asking, should I go to Harvard? And he said, like, if you want to be part of a fight, and I don't mean physically, but sometimes it is become physical, but really part of that fight, then know that if you go there, you're going to be part of that. But I keep saying Vanderbilt because actually the Chancellor Vanderbilt was on the Dan Senor podcast a couple weeks ago, and he was great. And Senor was asking him, like, what have you done here that is working? And he actually said what Tori said, what we're trying to model. He's like, the second that a student comes on our campus, they know how the dialogue will happen. And he talked about how we bring speakers from left and right and center and accused of everything, but they know how the dialogue will happen. So I don't want to say that they weren't prepared. Yeah, they were prepared in their math and sciences, but all of us weren't prepared on October 8th of what was going to happen just days later, whether it's, like I said, physical harm of graffiti or this or that. We're down the street from UCLA. I mean, I had to tell my own children why there were helicopters over the head for not 24 hours, but like 2 weeks. So none of us were prepared. And so we're sort of starting from a foundational level. But now that we know that Berens scholars are for our 11th and 12th graders, now we can work backwards and say, okay, then what does an 8th grader need? What does a 9th grader need? So then when they get to this point, they will be, our head of school at Sinai Cube Academy, she says, the success of our school will be to prepare our children for the jobs that we do not know will exist tomorrow. And I think the same is true for our teens right now. We have to prepare the students for the tomorrow that we do not know. And I think a lot of that, though, also comes from connection to synagogue. And I don't just mean Shabbat services. I mean a deep connection to their roots and tradition.
And if I may, with the increased polarization in our country, I would posit that the majority of our country is not prepared and knows how to have conversations. And so I actually think everyone needs to go through dialogue training and learning how to deepen connections. And that is what will help unite all of us. And it's really great that these teens are learning skills that will not just support them to be advocates for Israel, advocates for Jews, fighting against anti-Semitism, but will be good human beings and like citizens who contribute to a country, who seek to build bridges as opposed to divides. And like that is, the sort of like grander impact that can happen when we teach people how to have conversations mindfully.
I appreciate that. Looking at the rest of conservative Judaism, and FJMC has men's clubs in about 200 in North America. So this message is going to go out to all those clubs through the recordings and our follow-ups. How would you advise, or have you already talked with rabbis at other shuls about how they can develop a program for their synagogue? And how would you suggest? Do you have a template for it, or do you have a kind of to-dos on it?
Okay, the secret's going to come out. Here we go. So again, I harken back to our Rabbinical School Fellowship when the funders of that program asked me, like, what will be the products? And I had to make it up 3 years ago. And now I have empirical evidence of the products, and we're overflowing in terms of the applications. I envision that happening the same way, right? When we said, how will we prepare our students against anti-Semitism? And this was in the midst of, I don't want to say PTSD, but the actual trauma that we were, emotional trauma on this side of the pond that we were going through. And so we started right with R16. It's also important that of the 16, so you mentioned day school and religious school, of the 16 students that are in our fellowship right now, only one is in Jewish high school. However, about half went to Jewish day school until 8th grade. So a lot of these students are actually seeing each other for the first time in 3 years back at the synagogue. I repeat that, back at the synagogue. That's very important. And so we are developing a model right now that will be national, that will expand to, I believe, 3 cities next year. I'm not going to name them right now. But because Sinai is an amazing hub of Israel and activity and connections with really beautiful speakers, right? When we have Jonathan Greenblatt, thankfully, we want to share that with others. And so Jonathan was in New York on Sunday, but all of our teams were in here. And so speakers is going to be easy. That's a hybrid model. Your cohort will be with you in Massachusetts or Virginia or Florida or Iowa or wherever. And then we bring the speaker to you all together. That's really important. And we are planning for a Shabbaton for those students. We're hopefully going to have 50 students next year. We will have a Shabbaton in LA to begin. So we actually know each other before we get on the screen. And Tori's developing that Shabbaton right now and really around that dialogue piece. And then the immersive experience, I think, will be very interesting. So we're going to go to UCI Hillel for an evening here and speak to the student leaders, a lot of them who are alumni of Sinai Temple. But if we're dealing with New York, they're going to go to Columbia or NYU. And if we're dealing with Columbus, Ohio, then they're going to go to Ohio State. And then when we come back together, oh, is it different in Ohio than it is in California, this is in New York? And so the immersive experiences are going to be parallel, but the same topic, if you wish, coming from different parts of the country. And then we're going to find, lastly, a domestic conference to go all together to, which we want to make sure it fits the right mission for the teens and for the mission of the Berens Scholars Program.
That sounds like great, and does certainly sound like a lot of work. Would our men's clubs, sort of as emissaries, be able to have these conversations with the rabbis in their schools, and first make the case that what you're doing here is to prepare the Jewish youth to be able to go to college and be prepared? Would that be something our clubs could initiate with the rabbis, and then some of them have already spoken to you, as you said, but be able to contact you? But each rabbi, it seems to me, it's a rabbi-driven program, so they would be driving the program and creating it based on where they think their kids are in their shul. Would that be correct?
A little bit of both. So we really want to sort of create a movement, if you wish, right? So if we just like send out the packet of like do X, Y, and Z, then we're not necessarily working in tandem, right? What was beautiful about when I staffed USY Pilgrimage for 3 summers, one of them with Noah Sudo, Tom's son, one of the best summers of my life, is that I met Jews from Dallas, Texas for the first time. I met Jews from Arizona and honestly, even California. I had not met it from upstate New York. And so to see the movement, right, come together, that's huge. And so we would prefer that we do this like together, while understanding, if we're on a Zoom with, I just keep using, let's say Rabbi Wolpe, right? He's going to hear what's happening in Texas and Nevada and wherever, but also our kids will. So like we have a lot of kids from LA go to Tulane. That's been very popular right now. Great. So what is it like down there? And what is it like in Stanford up north here? So geography really matters in this piece. We're not just doing history of Israel. We're actually doing what does all of this look like on these campuses, and where will you not only feel safe, but where will you prosper? So we want to make sure that it's not just, okay, I have this toolbox and I do this program. We want rabbis actually speaking to each other. We want this sort of movement happening. And also it's going to be beautiful, really important. This started in a conservative synagogue. That's really important to know. And the fact that it starts in a conservative synagogue, but Orthodox and Reform rabbis are interested in also doing that, I think that is a very, very, very big victory, not a small victory, big victory for the conservative movement that we can scale this up.
I understand now the larger picture here, and you are trying to create a movement, so these kids will then be growing together, sharing all that, and then hopefully bringing in other teens as well. There are Jewish organizations on campuses. Was your data, and when you and Julie were talking, do you feel that organizations on campus, whether Hillel or Chabad or others, were perhaps they needed some help to focus better on what you're all doing, or is their mission a bit different than what you are in your cohort, what you're looking at giving them an experience?
You're saying the organizations on campus.
The students are already on campus, so when these students to get there, are they going to be working with Hillel and saying we should try to do this? Is that part of what the goal is, to make these kids more involved with organizations on campus?
Absolutely. Come April, when we get college acceptances wherever they're going to go, we're going to actually pick up the phone and call those, like I said, Hillel directors and say, you have a winner here. You're ready to go. And so number one, that, and number two, actually about to interview Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove, his awesome book, if you haven't seen it. And he says like why he became a rabbi was because he went to Michigan and didn't really go to Shabbat services. I literally just read this 2 minutes ago, or sorry, half hour ago. And his somebody at Sinai Temple, where he grew up here, passed away, and he went to say Kaddish, and somebody invited him for Shabbat dinner, and it was a Hillel director. And from there, he came again and became a Jewish studies person and a PhD and a rabbi and etc. So it was that one person that went like this. And Tori and I can think of, I'm thinking of one student right now, I'm not going to mention, who's sort of like that person for us. They're like, I haven't seen this kid. His father's like on the board, very active, and he's becoming like an all-star. Wherever this kid goes, like, we're going to follow him. And he's been quoted in the media now. When Avi Meir, the Jerusalem Post former editor, came a couple weeks ago, he came as one of those special experiences. He's writing a paper in school. He's connected with him. I'm watching these students really engage in a way well beyond the 5 seminars that we've given them so far. And they're seeing a place that they can come to for those resources. So yes, when they get to Hillel, they're not going to be the president yet, but they're going to be ready to say, like, they're going to feel an excitement, a pride, to be part of something they can make a big difference beyond themselves.
I think that'll be great. A short note, I'm on the board of George Mason Hillel here in Fairfax, Virginia.
He's great.
And in the last couple of years or so, with things that have been happening on all the campuses, our observance has been that our Hillel students have sort of recessed a bit, withdrawn a bit, not so much interested in doing too many public-facing Jewish events, and even less this year seem to have identified themselves as Jewish students. So by the time they get into college, it looks very difficult. So I appreciate what you're doing. But let me ask Tori a question in terms of who these kids are. Early this year, our committee interviewed Dr. Samantha Vinegar Meinrath, who wrote Antisemitism, Coming of Age During the Resurgence of Hate. And she focuses on Gen Z, those kids born between 96 and 2012, who today would be middle schoolers to recent college graduates. And what she was looking at was that anti-Semitism is one fear of theirs, but they have others. During their lives, they've known nothing but mass shootings at schools. They've known nothing but social media threats, and they've known nothing seemingly but physical insecurities. Is anti-Semitism equal to those? Is it more than that? Are we asking these young Jewish people to do more than they can because they're already feeling so physically insecure that anti-Semitism to them is just sort of one more insecurity? What do you think, Tori?
Just to clarify your question, you're asking if I think the act of fighting anti-Semitism, if that's like asking too much from people who have their entire lives known other insecurities. I think I am no scholar, I'm no psychologist or scholar of human psychology or anything like that. And so this is me just speaking from the experience that I have with these teens. This seems to be a high priority for these teens. They are signing up to do this and participate in this. This is something that they care about, and they are curious about how to make an impact. And I think going back to what I was saying earlier about how like we don't know what the impact will, how this training can expand their capacity for impact that they can make in the world in general. And I really do believe that teaching these skills, they're transferable skills. They're not skills only in regard to fighting against anti-Semitism. And so we're doing it in the frame of fighting against anti-Semitism, but really they're transferable and can have greater impact. I also think that, social media plays such a huge role in all of their experiences, the way that they consume the news, the way that they interact from day to day. I think even like the the experience of anti-Semitism is, for many of them, largely on social media. Not as much, people don't have as much chutzpah to say something derogatory in person as they do when they're online. They can say whatever they want, right? It's easy behind a keyboard. And so part of the training too is kind of figuring out that emotional regulation of what is worth it and what is not, and what are the things that actually feel like it's worth our time to stand up and advocate for, and what are the things that we're like, okay, this is just some troll on the internet and maybe I don't have to be so upset about it today. But we can't that it's hard to figure that out on your own. Being a teenager is really hard. You're going through puberty, you're like, have the hormones, you want to fit in. There's like all of that peer pressure and social pressure and all of that. And so to have this laboratory is like the space where we can think through it. And I'll give an example of a story of one of the teens asked when Jonah Platt was in with us. One of the teens asked him what she should do because her sister was in a class at a public school that every single day in the history class, the teacher ended the class with BBC. And so the teacher would put on BBC News, which if you've watched BBC News lately, it's pretty anti-Israel bias. And this student is sitting in class having to see only that, right? And so she was like, well, how would I approach it? And Jonah suggested, and I think rightfully so, that the way to approach this is to first of all find an advocate, a staff advocate. But more importantly, when you find the person that can help and support you, the argument that you want to bring to the administration is that this is not equal perspectives. So if the teacher wants to show BBC, that's one perspective. If it's not being couched as a singular perspective, then that's not actually giving us honest education. That is forcing a single perspective. So is it possible to also have another perspective in the class? And so again, this is teaching these teens that when you have something that's worth fighting against, the response is not to say, my feelings are hurt and I'm offended and I'm triggered, so fix it. It's to say, what about this is actually the problem? The problem is that you're teaching a single track perspective. And if this claims to be a public school with a liberal education system, then we need to actually expose people to multiple perspectives.
And I want to add to that, what you see in schools, at least in Los Angeles Unified School District, is some troubling things like Tori's explaining. And you also have a series of people in their 20s and 30s. You talk about people born 96 to 2012. In the Israel piece, pre-October 7th, right, that we were told we were lied to. These are young people who now are in Jewish Voice, JVP, Jewish Voices Peace, if not now. And so there's an interesting way of understanding what students desire, right, to make sure that it's not, I don't want to say one-sided, but when we do our Israel Fellowship for our students, rabbinical students, we always, if it's a topic, try to have both opinions at the table. If not, then at least one after the other, so that we can, I guess, be accused of being wrong on both or right on both. But the fact that those exist. Now, obviously, there are some red lines here and there, but the same thing. If, when you think of Israel or Jewish pride, when you're talking about religious school, and I love religious school, we have one of the best religious schools in LA here, there's just not enough time to teach everything. So Israel, it's flags and Am Yisrael Chai, and we love it, but do we get to any type of depth? So when they get to 8th grade, right? 8th grade, and they hear something from a teacher, they know what they're hearing if it's only one perspective. So it is a big job. It's just beginning. We're taking it from off the college campus to in the high school, but not in the high school classroom, but in the Jewish synagogue, so that when they can get there, they can have these tools. So we're just beginning. It's a pilot, but it's been a very exciting pilot.
I understand. Miles, you have a question?
Yeah, hey, this is an exciting program you're rolling out, and I appreciate your vision for how you're developing a movement in a planned way. Maybe you've just answered that in the chat, but it seems like there's a really pressing need to disseminate some of this information quickly to a broad swath of kids who are planning or about to enter college. So are there some cheat sheets or tactical things that you can roll out fairly quickly that incoming college students can learn from?
Well, we can talk. Tori and I will talk about it in our weekly meeting. Tori's actually going to Israel for the semester tomorrow, so I'm losing her for a little while. But it's interesting that I'm hearing from everybody here around the country that this is a real big need. We've sort of been stuck in our bubble and sort of going to roll this out. But we're going to bring it back to our funders and talk about that piece as well. So thank you, Miles.
Great, thank you.
An important question is that one needs resources to make this happen. And you've been very fortunate that Julie and her family's foundation has been able to help that. And when I was discussing this with her, she was saying that, and I said, would the Federation be involved? She said the best way that this is done is where each synagogue finds its own internal funding for its own kids. So rather than going out to others, though I would think that that might be not a bad way to try and go to federations or others, or even men's clubs and resources. But in terms of what the congregations can do, led by the rabbi and the congregational president, how would they approach donors in their synagogue? What's the, you've all mentioned a lot of things, but what's the best way to approach them so that their members in their synagogue will say, this is worthwhile for our kids. It's not duplicative of the day school. It's not duplicative of the religious school. How would you say that we at men's clubs can go and encourage donors to approach their rabbis and make this happen the way you guys have done at Sinai Temple?
Yeah. Carefully. No, I'm just kidding. No. Look, when you have somebody who is a donor come and approach you and have this vision and allow the synagogue to be the place where that vision is enhanced, I just want to point out we're blessed. I've been placed in this position to have this opportunity, and I feel like I'm a conduit and sort of a shaliach of that type of thing, and Tori probably can share the same way. But us at Sinai, right, from the speakers that you heard, right, not like the representative of, like, these are top speakers that are spending time, literally time that they don't have, saying this is important, then we want to be a resource sort of to that. So yeah, I mean, people should, I don't know every city, and small cities are different than larger cities, and small congregations are different than larger congregations. That's why we're trying to connect the dots nationally. We have to start small to make sure that is actually doable and manageable. And honestly, I find that wonderful speakers are willing to give their time because they know that it will make a big difference.
And we will do our part, our share, in terms of distributing not only this recording, but some of what you've mentioned here, do a write-up, and what Julia's mentioned. And we here at Men's Clubs are going to use this as a way to get ourselves more involved in our children's education or our grandchildren's education, and do these things and find a way to find the resources to identify them. So I appreciate that. I had another question.
It shouldn't be out of fear. I think that's a lot of, October 8th, we started saying we're afraid, and so we have to, like, put our fist up. That's not gonna help, really. It's gonna help when you are confident in who you are, but also knowing the other, right? When we come to Martin Luther King weekend in a couple of weeks, we have a Unity Shabbat where we partner with an African American church, and for the first time last year, we actually went to the church. right? If I ask these kids, how many times have you been to a church? They're probably going to say never. And so they should go to a church before they go to college, not to be converted to Christianity, but to understand that there are people that support us, just as when the George Floyd riots happened, we were there for that African American community too. And so that's where the allyship piece comes in, which I'm really excited, and that can happen anywhere. So a lot of the smaller pieces that we're doing can happen in any congregation, with the right person to just connect those dots. There's universities in every camp, in every school, in every city. There's rabbis in every city, and there's pastors and reverends in every city too.
Excellent. Thank you. I anticipated my next question that I was about to ask was in working with other faiths. And my question was, and I think you've answered part of it, is, or other faiths, or have you engaged other faiths to talk to these students so they can, in fact, understand those faiths and be more prepared when they go to college? Sounds like you do have other faiths that are involved in this program.
So we're doing a couple things. So starts usually from faith leader to faith leader, and if you wish, you sort of date the community, right? Like, oh, is this like the right fit? And truthfully, since October 7th, there have been some communities that are saying this is too political, I don't want to talk about it, but we can feed the homeless together, right? That's been a very common type of thing. But when you do get a community that is willing to both talk about it and be supportive of each other, that's when you got to take that next step. So we have wonderful relationship with the Catholic Church. We have wonderful relationship with the Baptist Church. We have wonderful relationship with the Mormon Church. Actually, in a couple of weeks, the teens from the Mormon Church are going to come here, do a tour, and then we're going to go to the visitor center. Because it shouldn't be the first time that you meet somebody from the Church of Latter-day Saints that you're on the college campus. Even in our public schools, where our kids are coming from, most of the kids are actually, when I ask, like, do you have non-Jewish friends? They often say no, even when they're in public schools, because we're in such Jewish area. And I understand like the concerns of socialization and all that stuff, but there's a balance of like how also you have to know the outside world. And so for the first time when you're going to a public middle school or a private middle school, then you have to also know the outside world while also being proud of who you are. If you don't have the pride in who you are, though, and the knowledge of who you are, then you're going to have a challenge getting there. Maybe Tori wants to say a few words about that.
Let me ask another question of my rabbi. A recent survey of teens aged 14 to 18 was conducted by Mosaic United, initiative of Israel's Ministry of Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism in the wake of the October 7th attack, finding that teens with strong Jewish education will show more support for Israel. Would this data be corroborated by your teens in this program and the data that you have?
So you're saying more support for Israel, right?
If teens ages between 14 and 18 have more Jewish education, then they will be more supportive of Israel.
So I know it's on record here, and it's doesn't always work like that. I probably have had 10 conversations this year, and Tori will definitely go from there. Maybe rabbinical students and college students that you've seen that have come to me and said, what did I do wrong? My child went to Jewish day school, Camp Ramah, USY, college campus, and they're not what I thought they would be. I have 3 children, so I understand that every child is very different, no matter how much you would like to craft your child. But definitely helps 100%, right? I think the way that we do these conversations now that did not exist 3 years ago, 5 years ago, as I said before, that we've been lied to, I think that can help. When we go to Israel for our rabbinical fellowship, our first year, we went to Bethlehem for a day with an East Jerusalem Palestinian who writes for the New York Times, as well as went to Efrat and met Rabbi Leo D., who lost his entire family in a terrorist attack on Pesach going up to Tiberias in the same day. And then we got back to the hotel, like, okay, well, what was that? How do we process that? So when Tori said 45 minutes is on processing, that's important. Students and people need to like not just hear something and say yes or no and store it in a memory bank, but what does this mean? Where is it coming from? What's the source? Where should it be taken? So I agree, it absolutely helps, right? If you have zero Jewish education, I'll just give you one example. Somebody listened to Jonah Platt's podcast, reached out to him. He connected me with this person in Pasadena. This woman told me yesterday she was born Jewish, but never had anything Jewish. And now she's like, who am I? So yes, of course, if there was any Jewish education at all, she would have a step up in that piece. I think it's a full ecosystem that needs to happen. And conversations like these, which definitely have not happened in classrooms before or in communities before, I think will help turn the tide, if you wish.
I think it's an excellent answer, and I guess we could say it depends. It certainly doesn't hurt, but there may not be enough. There may be more that needs to be done to convert that. Yes.
And if I can just add something, part of the importance to the exposure of the different narratives is actually as a way of preventing the "we've been lied to" perspective. And actually, I think a lot of, there was this whole documentary that came out of people my age that grew up at Jewish summer camp saying that we've been lied to. So it would not be accurate to say that those people did not have strong Jewish education, strong Israel education. Those people had all of that and still felt that they had been lied to, right? And I don't think that that's an accurate, personally, I don't think that that's an accurate perspective. That's a pretty strong accusation. And I think that one of the things that we talk about with the teens, and I talked about just this last week with them, is, knowing when does it make sense to also, when someone who comes from a different perspective from you, to also talk about the sadness and the pain of especially over this last just over a year of war. Horrible things happen in war, and I don't think anybody can deny that. And acknowledging that and acknowledging our humanity is part of acknowledging the accuracy, or acknowledging the earnestness in the conversation. And actually, there's a professor at HUC. Her name is Dr. Rabbi Laura Novak Weiner, and she recently published a book or she's currently working on it, I don't totally remember, where she is suggesting that we change the language from Ahavat Israel to Yodat Israel, that it's not just to teach this blind faith love of this place, because that puts it up in this ephemeral, it's not real, but it's a country, it's real there. And things that are real, just like every country in the world, also have messes, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that we are any less proud of those places. It doesn't mean that we have to abandon those places, but it's much easier to acknowledge that with the concept of yodat, to understand, and a deep understanding of the place that hopefully leads to the love, right? As opposed to starting from the love at the beginning.
I think audience matters too. So the way that we're speaking right now, right, openly, honestly, this would not be a sermon necessarily, right? This is a group conversation. So the way that you're writing a letter in your high school newspaper is different than you're writing an op-ed to the LA Times. We do a lot of work with this with the rabbis, and I think with the teens, we're going to do some more work as well. When you're on the playground with your friends, it's different than being on Bruin Walk at UCLA when you're getting attacked verbally for that. So even when you have the same knowledge, the Yodat piece, how you use it is also important because you're in different situations.
I appreciate both of your comments on that, and I should just share with you that we have had more people now coming on. Again, somehow we apologize for the poor link that we had, but finally we've got some on, and you have here several past leaders of FJMC, our presidents. And we also have on here the Western Region President, Warren Sterling is on, and he is head of the Western Region, which includes all the Western states and Arizona. So I think it's very important for him to see this work within the Western Region, and that he, as well as the rest of us who are in leadership positions, will be able to pass this on and encourage our clubs to do what you have guidance. I have one more question here before we close. Barry Oslick from the Baltimore area.
Hi. First, I apologize if I'm going to hit something that you covered earlier. Unfortunately, I had to come on late because I had to go to Minion. I had yard site tonight. Part of the issue that we've discussed is, and if your program is doing this, reaching out to the parents also to get them involved in understanding, because we've talked about if the kids hear it from you, that's great, but if they don't get it reinforced at home, then it kind of gets lost. So are you doing anything to approach that area?
Yep. So the first session with Rabbi Wolpe was all parents included. That was amazing, and they stayed longer than the kids. They just like wanted more. The parents were asking the questions of how Jewish can my child be on application, things like that. When we had, as Tori said, these VIP experiences, so Ophir Engel, who's one of the released hostages at 54 days, he was coming to LA actually with an organization called Israel Is, and they do virtual reality, sharing the stories of hostages. It's really intense. And I said, can you do that at the synagogue? I said, well, it's like in 2 days. I said, you know what? Let's call our Berens scholars. It was actually at a home, and the families were there, parents and children. So a lot of the immersive experiences have in fact been with parents. And so that's been extremely helpful. At the same time, when they're, as you know, kids don't talk in front of parents. So Tori is able to have them open up in ways that, they're not going to open with the parents, but then we have these actually immersive experience together. So yes, this is not just a drop-off program. I know these parents really well. I see them in the hallways. Like I said, the percentage of increased engagement in this field over the last 3 months has been incredible, and that's been the biggest success. And it's because of that. When I'm doing the recruitment, it was from the parents, to be honest. It wasn't from the kids.
Great,
Excellent.
thank you.
We appreciate the time very much. Rabbi and Tori, any closing remarks, any content you'd like to pass on to us?
Tori, as you're going to Israel like tomorrow, any words of wisdom before I close?
I mean, I feel so humbled and honored to be a part of creating this fellowship and being a part of shaping and molding our Jewish future. And I feel really confident about the Jewish future. And I think that that's like, if there's anything to impart, it's that feel confident, right? Rabbi Daniel Hartman came to Sinai maybe like almost a year ago. And one of the things that he said is, don't mistake our children's exclamation points for what they really are, which is question marks. And to love and embrace the curiosity of teenagers and college students, and hold on and be curious and ask questions. And I think that is our role in this, as guides to them, is to just be curious, right? Less telling them what to think, but more just like letting them develop into their own. And I feel really, really confident about our future.
And I would close by saying, when somebody says they're a visionary, I know people say like, I need the curriculum, or I need the one page sheet to do, the answers. I would actually, if I'm going to send you a 1-page sheet, it's going to be the questions. Rabbi Wolpe, my predecessor, his vision was always about asking questions and identifying the needs. Julie Platt and the Barron Foundation was the same way. This was really, really special opportunity. She believes in it, her family believes in it, and we believe in it. And to see it spread like this really quickly, it's ahavat chinam. It's not senseless hatred, but it's actually senseless love, and that's what we're hopefully gonna do here. So I appreciate this opportunity as well to talk to FJMC. We're always open to speak with local synagogues as well as we progress here, because we want, like I said, this wants to be a movement. We're excited for that.
Well, if there's anything that we can
appreciate
do to
that.
help spread it, we'd love to be able to support your activities. This is really a remarkable program. But again, we reach out to a lot of congregations. We'd be happy to be emissaries for something like this. It's really very important.
Thank you. You know what? Maybe we'll think about, and Tori and I can talk about this. I know it's still on record, but maybe doing a couple of like, as we expand, maybe just like bonus seminars for like everybody, so they can see into what we're doing as we begin something like that.
We would be very happy to share that with our some 8,000 to 10,000 members across North America. So
Great.
please feel free to share with us. We'll get it out there. And our men's clubs definitely want to be involved in this because we don't know the answers, but we do see what's happening with our kids as they're growing older. And if there's some ways that we can help them to become curious, as Tori has said, and understand, that'll be just greatly appreciated. Thank you again to both
Thank
of
you,
you,
everybody.
Mr. Kowak, to all that you are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for joining us.